Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Jeanelle Slade.
And I'm Jay Cohn. As the debate over the future of Confederate monuments in the U.S. intensifies, Montana's capital city deals with the same issue.
Helena city leaders decide to join other cities across America and will remove a Confederate monument to avoid potential violence down the road.
We begin, though, in Baltimore tonight, where under the shroud of darkness, 4 Confederate memorials were removed from local parks last night. Baltimore is just one of several U.S. cities that are dealing with demonstrations against these Confederate symbols.
From Lexington, Kentucky to Birmingham, Alabama, officials are ordering statues and monuments boarded up or removed. The Southern Poverty Law Center found as many as 1,500 Confederate memorials across the country. That includes 718 statues and monuments and 10 U.S. military bases named after Confederate officers.
And as for critics of the memorials, they now have their eyes on Capitol Hill in Washington.
After hours of public testimony before the Helena City Commission this evening, a decision is reached that the city's Confederate memorial must go.
MTN's Jacob Fuhrer reports.
A line out the door, residents waiting their turn to give testimony in favor or against the century-old Confederate memorial.
That history has no place in Helena or in the state of Montana.
The controversy sparked in part by a letter from Native American lawmakers calling for its removal. Now their request granted.
But I think the time has come to remove the fountain.
The City Commission ordering the fountain removed as fast as possible. Many who testified before the commission said doing so won't take away the city's history like some fear.
We're preventing people from bringing in the hatred and bigotry. We're not erasing history. History will be here forever.
Others are not so sure, saying no one will remember that time in history now.
The students that come to America, that are born, that are not even born now, they will have no real concept of what it was like for Civil War veterans. I think some cities will, at one point or another, put a crack in the dam.
That dam, he says, could give way to a slippery slope, erasing other parts of Montana's history in its path.
Community members did have some suggestions saying perhaps to cover up the inscription or even completely remove that, but city commissioners say they have concerns about leaving this memorial in town.
I believe that if the fountain remains in the park, there will likely be a confrontation where high emotions, coupled with strong beliefs, spill over into violence, and we do not need a violent event in our capital city.
Other commissioners echoed that sentiment, saying it's a matter of public safety. Though the decision has been made, the details remain to be seen.
In terms of where it ought to go or what ought to become of it or what ought to replace it, those conversations will happen sometime in the future.
In Helena, Jacob Fuhrer, MTN News.
Thanks, Jacob. Now, the great-great-grandson of Confederate General Robert E. Lee condemns last weekend's violence in the city of Charlottesville.
In a statement, Robert E. Lee V says, quote, General Lee's life was about duty, honor, and country. At the end of the Civil War, he implored the nation to come together to heal our wounds and to move forward to become a more unified nation. He never would have tolerated the hateful words and violent actions of white supremacists, the KKK, or neo-Nazis.
Lee said it might be appropriate for Confederate statues to be exhibited in a museum, but he says if local leaders decide to take the statues down, he'll be fine with that.
In other news tonight, a pair of convicts wanted in Butte arrested in Billings today after crashing a stolen van into a downtown building. Police say 20-year-old John English and 27-year-old Maxwell West walked away from the pre-release center in Butte last night. The two suspects were serving time for drug crimes, but now face several additional charges. Allen's Tool Repair Shop at 5th Street and Cook Avenue sustained significant damage, and a nearby shed in the stolen van's path was completely destroyed. Lieutenant Mark Cady says the suspects then tried to flee before police apprehended them. Cady tells Q2 he believes English and West stole a pickup truck near Big Timber before allegedly stealing the van in Billings. Tonight, both suspects are being held at the Yellowstone County Jail on possession of stolen property and obstruction charges.
A stabbing at Montana Fair last night injures 2 people, but so far no arrests or charges. When sheriff deputies responded to a disturbance near the Heritage Center around 11:30 Tuesday night, They found one man with a stab wound in his arm, another man with a possible head injury. Sheriff Mike Linder says the investigation indicates that several young adults confronted one another when one male was knocked to the ground. Witnesses say the man who was assaulted pulled out a knife, and at some point an individual was stabbed in the arm. When deputies arrived, several young adults then fled the area. The two injured men were taken to the hospital for treatment. Police did detain and question at least one person, but he was later released. Montana Fair Marketing Director Ray Massey tells us this is the only incident so far resulting in an injury since the fair's opening last Friday. Massey tells us security at Montana Fair is a top priority and points out as many as 65 crew members work the grounds during fair hours, along with 4 to 6 sheriff deputies.
Some eye-popping numbers included in the final report on the nation's largest wildfire so far this year. According to the Bureau of Land Management, it cost $9.8 million to fight the lodgepole complex of fires in north central Montana.
The 270,000-acre complex of fires started July 20th. The catastrophic blaze went on to destroy 16 primary homes, numerous secondary structures, along with hundreds of miles of fencing and haystacks. McCone Electric alone lost more than 120 power poles at a cost of $480,000. BLM of Montana and Dakota's Chief of Communications, Al Nash, says the largest cost was for aerial support to fight the fast-moving flames.
From bringing in air tankers and large helicopters to the cost of fuel, personnel, and resources, the bill adds up quickly. A specific cause of the lodgepole complex of fires has never been determined.
On to the weather scene now, where our summer fire season is far from over, and Bob McGuire, the conditions are not improving.
No, we got another red flag warning that goes into effect tomorrow at noon and goes right on through 9 p.m. on Friday. Take a look at it. It's a big area. It covers most of eastern Montana, but now we still have some issues out around Sealy Lake and Missoula. That's where we have an air quality alert because of the wildfires out there. The air out there is just downright almost unbreathable. It's basically unhealthy to hazardous air from Sealy Lake, and it's been that way for about a week now, right on through Missoula. Now, starting tomorrow, we got another cold front moving through, and it's going to create some very strong gusty winds in eastern Montana, 15 to 30 mile per hour winds. Should those winds get going, it's going to cause some very erratic fire behavior, and so that's going to create most of eastern Montana at a red flag warning right on through Friday. We'll have more in your forecast coming up in a few more minutes.
All right, thanks, Bob.
A traveling memorial for the 60,000 Americans who lost their lives in the Vietnam War arrives in Billings.
It's called The Wall That Heals. It's a half-scale replica of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. At 250 feet long, it travels across the country, visiting more than 400 cities since it was first unveiled back in the 1990s.
The traveling wall is being set up at Will James Middle School, where it will be on display for a couple days.
This gives people an opportunity to come out and see the wall, and there's usually quite a few veterans around that will stop and answer questions and talk to the people. There are some that can't handle it, and if they don't want to talk, don't force them, just let them be.
Now, there will be a special opening ceremony for the Wall of Healing tomorrow at 10 a.m.
An estimated 50,000 Elvis Presley fans turned out in Memphis, Tennessee today to help mark the 40th anniversary of Elvis's death.
Mola Lengi reports from Graceland with the latest.
Elvis fans took photos outside the gates of Graceland while a steady stream of visitors toured the inside of the King of Rock and Roll's Memphis home.
His music is so calming, soothing.
He seems to be like a very caring, loving person.
40 years after his death, Elvis Aaron Presley is still the best-selling solo artist of all time. Mike Stoller and his partner Jerry Lieber wrote Jailhouse Rock and several other Elvis hits.
We write for him, we wrote with him in mind, with his abilities, and he never failed.
Didn't let you down?
No, not at all.
Fans passing through Graceland this anniversary represent many generations, a testament to Elvis's lasting legacy.
The fans range in age from the grandmother who actually saw Elvis on stage in the 50s to, kids of this generation who heard an Elvis song in the latest commercial on TV.
Once you become an Elvis fan, you're always an Elvis fan.
39-year-old Natasha Marakich developed a clothing line geared to kids called Elvis, the Next Generation. The slogan is Dream Big. Elvis did.
I believe in following your dreams and doing what he did.
The idea is to make sure the king stays the king for generations to come. Mola Lengi, CBS News, Memphis, Tennessee.
And new this year at Graceland is a $45 million Elvis entertainment complex. The complex features exhibits about Elvis's cars, his clothing, and there's also exhibits on other musical acts who had an influence on the king.
Still to come on tonight's 10 o'clock news, prominent business leaders stepped down from President Trump's Economic Council. We'll find out why.
And coming up, these dogs take the word fetch to a whole new level. In a moment, we'll hit the midway for some four-legged entertainment.
And in sports, this senior soccer star isn't big, but he's a big reason the Bronx will beat most opponents this year.
You're watching MTN News with Jay Cohn and Jeanelle Slade. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Green.